He had no idea he was looking at his own executioner. "You're just a footnote." "Sienna, a charity case. I need a partner. Not a liability." His voice was ice, his eyes dismissing her like something left on a curb. 7 years later, the heavy doors of courtroom 12 swung open, and Damon Whitmore, now facing a brutal and very public divorce, looked up at the bench. "All rise," the bailiff announced. For the Honorable Judge Sienna Calloway. The rain came down in sheets over Chicago that night, turning the lights along the Riverwalk into long, bleeding streaks of gold and white. Inside Maison Solène, a narrow French bistro tucked beneath the Wabash Avenue Bridge. The air smelled like seared duck fat and warm candle wax, and the low murmur of wealthy conversation rolled between the brick walls like something expensive being whispered. For 24-year-old Sienna Calloway, a second-year student at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, this dinner was supposed to be a celebration. She had just secured a coveted clerkship track placement with a federal appellate judge, a milestone that could anchor an entire career for a girl who had grown up in a leaking house outside Youngstown, Ohio, raised by a mother who waited tables 14 years straight off Route 11, and a father who left when she was 6. Across the table sat Damon Whitmore, at 37. He was an adjunct lecturer in securities law at Northwestern and a partner track attorney at a private equity advisory firm in the Loop. The kind of man whose confidence had never once been tested by an unpaid bill. He wore a deep burgundy three-piece suit, a vintage gold tank-style watch, loose and careless on his wrist. For 14 months, they had kept their relationship hidden in the back stacks of the law library. In the elevator of his high-rise in Streeterville, after the doorman's shift ended, Sienna had loved him with the blinding, total intensity of a first real love. She thought they were building towards something. She thought tonight, of all nights, he might finally stop hiding her. Damon swirled his glass of rare aged single malt Scotch, staring somewhere over her left shoulder rather than at her. When he finally spoke, his tone was casual, as if he were noting a minor change to a contract rather than ending her world. "I'm getting married, Sienna," he said. The words dropped into the space between them like lead. Sienna's breath hitched. A confused, hopeful smile flickered on her lips. "What, Damon, what are you talking about?" "Her name is Bianca Castellani," he continued smoothly, taking a slow sip of the scotch. "Her father runs Castellane and Burke. We've been seeing each other a few months. We're announcing it at her family's harvest gala next month." The world tilted on its axis. The warm hum of the restaurant collapsed into a thin, ringing silence in Sienna's ears. "A few months? We've been together for 14 months. You've been cheating on me." Her voice cracked, betraying the sudden, violent tremor in her hands. She gripped the edge of the linen tablecloth to steady herself. Damon sighed the long, theatrical sigh of a man profoundly inconvenienced by another person's heartbreak. "Let's not be dramatic, Sienna. What we had was fun. It was a distraction. But you have to be realistic." His eyes swept over her mustard-yellow blazer, mended by hand at the seams. Over her pallor, shocked face. "Look at you. You're a student. You're drowning in loans. You don't know anyone in this city who actually matters. I love you," she whispered, the tears finally breaking free, hot and humiliating against her cheeks. "Love doesn't build anything, Sienna." The charming mask slipped fully away, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "You're a student, a footnote in my life. I need a partner, not a charity case. Bianca is a strategic alliance. You're a liability." He didn't wait for her to respond. He signaled the waiter, signed the bill without glancing at it, and stood. He reached into his coat, pulled out a single $20 bill, and dropped it onto her empty bread plate. "For your ride home. Have a nice life, Sienna. Don't reach out again, it would be embarrassing for you." He walked out, leaving her sitting alone in the middle of the crowded, candlelit restaurant. The $20 bill sat there like a brand. A small, Ugly receipt for exactly how little she'd mattered. Sienna didn't call a car. She walked the 3 miles back to her apartment near Rogers Park in the freezing, pouring rain. Her tears washing away the girl she used to be. By the time she got her key into the lock, she was soaked through, shivering, and fundamentally changed. The hopeful, trusting student had drowned somewhere along Lakeshore Drive. In her place, something colder, harder, and far more deliberate had begun to take shape. The morning after, Sienna didn't cry. She gathered every gift Damon had ever given her: a scarf, a thin gold bracelet, a stack of handwritten notes she'd once kept folded in her wallet like talismans, and threw all of it down the trash chute without looking at any of it twice. Then she sat down at her kitchen table, opened her constitutional law casebook, and began to read. Grief, when channeled correctly, is one of the most efficient engines a person can run on. And Sienna Calloway weaponized hers completely. She became a ghost on campus. She stopped going out, stopped dating, stopped sleeping more than 4 or 5 hours a night. Classmates whispered about the sudden, unsettling intensity radiating off her. The way she sat in the front row with her spine perfectly straight. The way she answered cold calls with answers so precise that professors sometimes just stopped and stared. She lived in the law library, absorbing statutes and precedent with the hunger of someone who had decided, once and for all, that she would never again be dismissed as a footnote in anyone's life. When she passed Damon on campus that fall, walking arm in arm with Bianca Castellane in a coat that cost more than her entire semester's budget, she didn't look away, and she didn't cry. She looked straight through them, her face an unreadable mask of stone. She graduated first in her class. Damon, meanwhile, married Bianca that summer in a sprawling ceremony at a vineyard estate outside Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, securing his partnership at Castellane and Burke on the strength of his new father-in-law's name. But Sienna didn't care anymore. She was already on a trajectory he couldn't have imagined. She skipped the glossy downtown firms he had always worshipped, and instead took a brutal clerkship with a notoriously exacting judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 7th Circuit. A man who taught her that justice was never blind. It simply waited for someone with the will to pick up the sword. From there she joined the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where she became something close to a legend. Within 3 years, she had a photographic memory and an utter absence of mercy for arrogant men in expensive suits who believed charm could substitute for the truth. She prosecuted white-collar fraudsters, a city alderman skimming contractor bids, a hedge fund manager laundering pension money through a chain of car washes. She built a reputation as brilliant, unyielding, and completely immune to manipulation. The years bled into one another, 7 years of relentless, agonizing, glorious work. The thrift store blazer was long retired, replaced by tailored cashmere knits bought with her own money. Without apology, the trembling girl from Ohio was gone, replaced by a 33-year-old woman whose stare, according to one defense attorney who later complained unsuccessfully to the Bar Association, could put out a house fire from across the room. Her rise didn't go unnoticed. When a seat opened on the state's family court bench, notoriously the most emotionally brutal assignment in the judiciary, the governor, impressed by her record and her ironclad ethics, appointed her. At 33, Sienna Calloway became one of the youngest judges in Illinois history. She ran her courtroom with absolute authority, having seen every lie, every hidden asset, every manipulation a desperate spouse could invent. Around the courthouse they called her the Marble Judge. Cold, immovable, impossible to crack a nickname she wore like armor. Because she had spent 7 years building a fortress, no one would ever get inside again. She hadn't thought about Damon Whitmore in years. He was exactly what he had once claimed she would be, a footnote. But fate and the legal system have a wicked sense of humor. Karma does not forget. It simply waits for the right docket. It was a grey Wednesday morning in late autumn. Judge Sienna Calloway sat in her chambers, sipping black coffee. Reviewing the day's case list, her finger paused on a line. Case No. 741 Castellane Whitmore v. Whitmore. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The hyphenation tugged at a memory she thought she'd sealed off years ago. She opened the file. Respondent: Damon Alistair Whitmore. Petitioner: Bianca Castellane Whitmore. A slow breath escaped her. It was him. The file was enormous. Emergency motions. Asset freeze requests. A forensic accounting subpoena. According to the preliminary filings, Damon had allegedly been caught in a string of affairs and was now accused of siphoning more than $6 million out of his wife's family trust into a web of offshore holdings over the past 3 years. Something moved through Sienna's chest. Not pain. Not even anger. But a sharp, electric clarity. She was the presiding judge over the financial ruin of the man who had once told her she didn't have the pedigree to matter. She stood, walked to the mirror, and pulled on her black judicial robe. Zipping it slowly, the robe was a symbol of her authority, her neutrality, her absolute domain. She picked up her gavel and walked out the door. Courtroom 12 buzzed with quiet tension. Damon Whitmore sat at the respondent's table. And 7 years had not been kind to him. His hair had thinned at the temples. His posture had collapsed into something smaller than the man who once swept through Northwestern's hallways like he owned the building. And his burgundy suit hung slightly loose, as if even his clothes had begun abandoning him. Beside him sat a nervous young associate named Patrick Doyle, visibly out of his depth. At the petitioner's table sat Bianca Castellane, composed and quietly furious. Next to her sat the man commanding the room's attention, Victor Lang, a legend in family law, silver-haired and merciless. Known for financially dismantling wealthy husbands across 3 states, he had done his homework. And he was hunting. All rise. The bailiff announced, the family division of the circuit court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Sienna Calloway, presiding. Damon slowly lifted his head as the judge climbed the steps to the bench. For 1 full second, their eyes met. Sienna watched the color drain completely from his face. His jaw went slack. His eyes widened in raw horror. As if he were staring at a ghost he'd personally buried. He blinked, trying to clear a hallucination that wasn't one. The footnote. The charity case. The girl he'd left crying in the rain with a $20 bill for her humiliation was now sitting elevated above him, holding the legal power to dismantle everything he had left. Sienna's expression didn't shift by a single degree. Good morning. Counsel, call the first case. Case number 7741D. Castellane Whitmore versus Whitmore. The clerk announced. She opened the file. Before we proceed, Counsel, there's a matter that must be addressed for the record. The room went still. It is my duty to disclose a prior acquaintance with the respondent, Mr. Whitmore, approximately 7 years ago. Prior to my legal career, Mr. Whitmore and I were briefly acquainted at Northwestern University. I'm offering both parties the opportunity to request my recusal from this matter to avoid any appearance of bias. Patrick Doyle leaned in and hissed. We need to file for recusal right now. If you have history with this judge, she'll bury you. But Damon, even cornered, even staring down financial ruin, was still fundamentally the same arrogant man he had been 7 years earlier. His mind raced. Victor Lang had him dead to rights on the infidelity. Bianca's family was moving to freeze his accounts. He was facing total ruin. But Sienna had loved him once. She had wept for him. In the rain. In his twisted, ego-driven logic. He convinced himself that a woman who had once loved him could never truly want to destroy him. He thought he'd found a lifeline. No. Damon whispered fiercely. Don't ask for recusal. Are you out of your mind? Doyle whispered back. Do exactly what I say. Damon commanded, a desperate gleam in his eye. He looked up at Sienna with a pleading expression that said, Save me. Doyle stood, looking nauseous. Your Honor. The respondent waives any request for recusal. We're confident in the court's impartiality. Sienna's face didn't move. She turned to Victor Lang. Mr. Lang, does the petitioner object? Lang smiled the slow smile of a man who'd done his homework on the marble judge, a jurist who followed the law to its harshest logical conclusion. No objection. Your Honor, we waive any conflict. Very well, Sienna said, lifting her pen. Waivers noted for the record. Mr. Lang, you may proceed with opening statements on the temporary asset freeze. Damon exhaled in quiet relief. Convinced he'd just played a masterstroke. He had no idea he had just handed her the blade. Victor Lang approached the podium. Your Honor, we're here because the respondent has engaged in a systematic scheme to divert marital assets. Over the past 3 years, Mr. Whitmore has funneled funds out of joint accounts and his wife's family trust into a network of offshore holdings. We have the forensics. We're asking the court to freeze his personal accounts, suspend his passport, and compel the immediate return of $6.8 million. That's a lie, Damon blurted. Half rising, crack, Sienna's gavel hit the sounding block like a gunshot. Damon jumped back into his seat. Mr. Whitmore, she said, her voice dropping low and razor-edged. Speak out of turn in my courtroom again, and you will spend the night in a holding cell. Do I make myself clear? Yes. Your Honor, he mumbled, his face flushing dark red. Whatever fantasy he'd had about a sympathetic judge collapsing instantly. Proceed. Mr. Lang, the trial stretched across 3 exhausting days. On the first, Lang built the infidelity case hotel records, a doorman's statement, recovered text messages. On the second, he pivoted to the fraud, calling a forensic accountant named Rosalind who walked the court through 18 months of wire transfers with devastating clarity, tracing funds through 2 domestic shell entities into an offshore structure registered in the Isle of Man under the name Northwind Capital Partners. She produced an email in which Damon had instructed a financial advisor to keep this structure separate from anything Bianca's family can subpoena. Sienna watched it all with the cold, unblinking focus of a hawk, ruling on objections with lightning speed, giving Damon's outmatched attorney no quarter, striking down every flimsy defense with brutal precision. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Victor Lang called Damon to the stand. Damon walked up, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth in a voice that tried and failed to summon the old authority he once used on his students. Mr. Whitmore, Lang began, I direct your attention to Petitioner's Exhibit 41, a wire transfer of $1.3 million to an entity called Northwind Capital Partners, registered in the Isle of Man. Do you hold any beneficial interest in that entity? Damon gripped the edge of the witness box. If he admitted it, he was finished. He decided, one last time, to gamble on his own arrogance. No, he said, his voice carefully level. I have no knowledge of that entity. My wife's family handles the investment structuring. I assumed it was one of her father's tax vehicles. Lang smiled, the smile of a man who'd just landed his fish. So, under oath, you're stating you are not the beneficial owner of the account at Clarendon Trust Bank. That's correct, Your Honor, Lang said, turning to the bench. I'd like to introduce a rebuttal exhibit. Late last night, we received a subpoenaed document directly from Clarendon Trust Bank, piercing the corporate structure of Northwind Capital Partners, the original incorporation record. The bailiff handed Sienna the document, and a copy to Doyle. Sienna's eyes locked onto the signature at the bottom. Mr. Whitmore, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. This is a notarized incorporation charter. It lists the sole signatory and 100% beneficial owner as Damon Alistair Whitmore. Is this your signature? Damon stared at the copy, the blood draining from his face so fast he swayed on his feet. He was caught, not just in a lie, but in felony perjury. In open court. I don't recall. He stammered. That could be falsified. Sienna leaned forward, and the air seemed to drop several degrees. "Mr. Whitmore, you are an attorney. You understand the penalties for perjury in this state. I will ask you one more time. Is that your signature?" For a fleeting second, Damon didn't see the judge. He saw a 24-year-old girl standing in the rain outside a bistro, holding a $20 bill she never wanted. He understood, with crushing weight, the magnitude of what he'd done 7 years ago, and the magnitude of his mistake today. He had waived the recusal. He had handed the blade to the woman he had destroyed. "Yes," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's my signature. No further questions." "Your Honor," Lang said, returning to his seat. "The witness is excused," Sienna said. Damon stumbled back to his table. A broken, defeated shell of a man. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Word having spread through the legal community about the high-profile divorce and the perjury collapse, Sienna entered, sat down, and opened her final ruling. "This court has reviewed all evidence, testimony, and financial forensics presented in the matter of Castellane Whitmore versus Whitmore," she began, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "The purpose of this court is to ensure equitable distribution of marital assets. However, equity relies on the fundamental assumption of honesty and good faith by both parties. The respondent has demonstrated neither." She paused, letting the silence hang. "The evidence overwhelmingly proves that Mr. Whitmore engaged in a systematic, premeditated campaign of financial fraud, attempting to hide more than $6 million in offshore accounts. Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore flagrantly lied under oath in this very courtroom. An act of perjury. This court finds deeply offensive to the judicial process." Damon stared at the floor, his breathing shallow. "Therefore," Sienna continued, her voice rising in power, "I am ordering the immediate dissolution of this marriage. Due to the egregious financial misconduct of the respondent, I am awarding the petitioner, Bianca Castellane, 100% of the disputed offshore assets, $6.8 million. A quiet gasp rippled through the gallery. She was taking everything. "Furthermore, I am ordering Mr. Whitmore to pay the petitioner's legal fees in their entirety, an amount totaling $610,000, the respondent's personal accounts, including his retirement holdings, will be liquidated to satisfy this debt immediately." Damon shot up from his chair. "Your Honor, you're leaving me with nothing. I'll be bankrupt. Sit down." "Mr. Whitmore." Her gavel slammed down with explosive force, and he sank back into his chair. She leaned over the bench, staring directly into the eyes of the man who had once told her she was worthless. The legal facade remained, but the subtext was crystal clear, a message delivered from the ashes of her past directly into the ruins of his future. "This court is not concerned with your resulting financial status. Mr. Whitmore, you gambled with your integrity, and you lost. You are now entirely responsible for the consequences of your own arrogance. You have nothing left because you valued nothing. You are, legally and financially speaking, a footnote." Damon flinched as if physically struck. The exact word he had used to destroy her had just been weaponized to end his life as he knew it. "Finally," Sienna concluded, closing the file, "a transcript of Mr. Rote. Whitmore's sworn testimony regarding the offshore accounts will be forwarded by my clerk to the State Bar Association for review of ethical violations and to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office for a formal perjury investigation. We are adjourned." The gavel fell for the last time. Sienna stood, her robe billowing around her, and walked out without looking back. In her chambers, she hung the robe on its stand and looked at herself in the mirror. She was no longer the girl crying in the rain. She was the storm itself. Back in the courtroom, Damon Whitmore sat completely paralyzed at the respondent's table. His wife had walked out victorious. His lawyer had already gathered his files and left. He had no money, no wife, no reputation, and was facing disbarment and criminal charges. He was utterly alone. He looked up at the empty bench, the heavy silence pressing down on him. Finally understanding the true, devastating cost of the woman he had thrown away over a $20 bill and a single cruel sentence. Talk about the ultimate karma. Damon thought he could discard Sienna like she didn't matter, severely underestimating the sheer willpower of a broken heart. He walked into that courtroom expecting a lingering ember of old feelings. But instead he met a blazing inferno of justice. Judge Sienna Calloway didn't just break his ego, she legally and methodically dismantled his entire life. If this story of brutal revenge and absolute legal karma got your heart racing, make sure you hit that like button right now. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only for you to prove them entirely wrong? Let us know your ultimate comeback stories in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves a good revenge story. And subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping real-life drama. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. See you next time.